This is the Sundeep Show.
Alright, let's begin. Following World War II, Germany was left in a vulnerable position. The goal of the Allies, which included the US, the UK, and the USSR, was to prevent a recurrence of the post-World War I economic collapse that gave rise to nationalist discontent and the Nazi Party. They planned to occupy Germany after the war ended to facilitate a smooth transition away from Nazi rule. On July 26, 1945, a statement was made that Nazi Germany had been defeated and that its armed forces had given up without conditions. Wow. It set forward the Allies' determination to destroy Nazi institutions and eliminate Nazi influence. The Allies made a crucial choice at the Potsdam Conference. Instead of governing and policing Germany simultaneously, they split it into 4 separate occupation zones, each under the jurisdiction of a different Allied country. In the summer of 1945, not long after the conclusion of World War II, a significant diplomatic gathering known as the Potsdam Conference took place. This conference was conducted in Potsdam, a German suburb located near Berlin. In attendance were the leaders of the Allies, including Harry S. Truman, who represented the US, Winston Churchill, who represented the UK, and Joseph Stalin, who represented the Soviet Union. The final significant Allied power conference during the war was the Potsdam Conference. Its main focus was on the post-war settlement, including topics such as reparations, war criminal punishment, Germany's split, and other significant issues pertaining to the reconfiguration of Europe and Asia following the defeat of Nazi Germany. It also prepared the way for the start of the Cold War and the subsequent separation of Germany into East and West. The political and ideological divide between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies contributed to the separation. It was a worry for the Western Allies that communism would grow, and the Soviet Union wanted to have a say in Eastern Europe. This separation was exacerbated by these ideological conflicts. After 2 world wars, there had been a fear of a return of German militarism, which was something that the division attempted to stop. It was also considered a means of guaranteeing that in the aftermath of the war, Germany would not be a danger to its neighbors. The separation grew stronger over time, resulting in the formation of 2 separate German states, the Federal Republic of Germany, that is West Germany, in 1949, and German Democratic Republic, that is East Germany, in 1949. The political and economic systems of these 2 countries were very, very different. East Germany was influenced by the Soviet Union, while West Germany was allied with the Western Allies. The segmentation of Germany into occupation zones was confirmed at the conference. The Soviet Union seized control of the Eastern Zone, which eventually became East Germany, while the US, the UK, and France were placed in the Western Zone. The conditions for Germany's demilitarization and denazification were laid down in the Potsdam Agreement. The objective was to eradicate Nazism and guarantee Germany's non-renewal as a military menace. The prosecution of war criminals was a subject of this agreement. As a result, the Nuremberg trials were set up, and notable Nazi officials were made to answer for their wartime deeds. Poland's frontiers were also discussed at this meeting, and it was decided that Poland would acquire territory from Germany in the north and west while losing area to the Soviet Union in the east. At the Potsdam meeting, world leaders deliberated how to best return refugees and prisoners of war to their own countries. Everyone agreed that those who were displaced by force through the conflict ought to be permitted to go back to their native nations. Japan's terms of capitulation were outlined in the Potsdam Declaration on Japan. In the proclamation, Japan was threatened with prompt and utter destruction if it did not comply with the demands for its unconditional surrender. A significant consequence of the Cold War, Germany was partitioned, as it became a strategic and symbolic arena for the confrontation between the Eastern and Western blocs. The separation persisted until the Berlin Wall collapsed in 1989 and Germany was reunited in 1990. This split was meant to be a short-term fix at first. Nevertheless, with the progression of the Cold War and the erosion of trust between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union, these occupied territories progressively transformed into two distinct German states: East Germany, German Democratic Republic, and West Germany, Federal Republic of Germany. The partition remained in place until 1989, when the Berlin Wall came tumbling down, an event that came to represent the reunification of Germany. Disagreements emerged about what would happen to Eastern Europe when the Soviet Red Army freed it from Nazi rule as World War II was nearing to a close. The Western Allies desired the establishment of democratic governments in these nations, whereas the Soviet Union desired the formation of communist governments that would advance its interests. These opposing viewpoints resulted in disagreements over the makeup of post-war governments in Eastern Europe countries, particularly Poland. Throughout the course of the conflict, the Allies established a succession of cooperative and synergistic agreements, including the Yalta Conference, the Atlantic Charter, and the Tehran Conference. The Soviets, on the other hand, accused the Western Allies of delaying the creation of a second front in Europe, that is, Operation Overlord, and failing to provide adequate military support to Eastern Front. Soviet mistrust was also heightened after the US dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 without first notifying or consulting the Soviet Union. It exemplified the United States' formidable destructive capability and emphasized its determination to maintain a position of power. The United States and the Soviet Union both conducted major spying operations against one another. These endeavors encompassed attempts to pilfer scientific and military secrets, and they increased mutual mistrust. Stalin was particularly distrustful of the Western Allies as a result of their intervention against the Reds during the Russian Civil War and their abandonment of Czechoslovakia before the war began. Stalin assured the people of Eastern Europe of the conduct of free and fair elections as Soviet forces displaced German ones. But a lot of these governments were compelled to form coalitions with popular fronts run by communists. Since the 1917 Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union had been shunned and mistrusted by the Western countries. It wasn't until the 1930s the Western nations, including the US, officially recognized the Soviet government after supporting the White Army during the Russian Civil War. The foundation of mistrust following the war was created by this history of animosity and non-recognition. The underlying ideological difference between the US and the USSR was the main cause of mistrust. In contrast to the capitalist democracy of the United States, the Soviet Union was a communist state. There was an inherent gulf between the two superpowers because their competing philosophies reflected radically different approaches to government, society, and the economy. Stalin favored splitting Germany into two countries. Germany had killed millions of people during its two invasions of Russia in less than 30 years. Stalin favored splitting Germany into two countries. Germany had killed millions of people during its two invasions of Russia in less than 30 years. The Soviets commanded the largest of the four Allied occupation zones, which included half of Berlin and its surroundings. Stalin was in favor of a united Germany provided it was totally demilitarized and deindustrialized. Germany's two invasions of Russia in less than 3 decades resulted in the loss of millions of lives, Stalin's objective was to eliminate any potential military threat that Germany might present to the Soviet Union in the future. Stalin desired that Germany reimburse the USSR for the harm done during the conflict. Such obligations would be more difficult to meet in a demilitarized Germany. At least that's the way he saw it. The Soviet Union, having endured tremendous devastation and loss of life during World War II, desired to prevent a future resurgence of a hostile, well-armed Germany. The immediate threat to Soviet security would be mitigated by a demilitarized Germany. Stalin aimed to debilitate and neutralize Germany as a possible adversary in Europe by advocating for a fully demilitarized Germany. This would preserve the Soviet Union's status as a significant power and strengthen its sway over Eastern Europe. Stalin proposed the reunification and neutralization of Germany in 1952, with no restrictions on economic policies. Many people in the West interpreted this suggestion, also known as the Stalin Note, as an attempt by the Soviet Union to extend its influence over a Germany that had been unified. Alright, we are at the very end. Stalin Note, the last chapter here for this episode. Stalin made a diplomatic suggestion known as the Stalin Note in March 1952. Stalin made a diplomatic suggestion known as the Stalin Note in March 1952. In the early years of the Cold War, the note, formally titled Note of the Soviet Government on the German Question, constituted a momentous development. The Stalin Note's main recommendation was for Germany to be reunited. Stalin proposed that a peace treaty be reached between the four occupying powers, the US, the UK, France, and USSR, and a unified, demilitarized, neutral, and unaligned Germany. As part of the peace deal, Stalin proposed all military troops would be pulled out of Germany. This was viewed as a solution to terminate Germany's post-World War II occupation and reinstate German sovereignty. The Stalin Note underscored the importance of neutrality and non-alignment for the unified Germany. This entailed abstaining from participation in military alliances and undertakings that could be deemed detrimental to the security interests of other nations. Stalin suggested that a reunified Germany would enjoy complete independence in all spheres of government and commerce. The note demanded that a peace treaty be quickly negotiated and signed with Germany. Its purpose was to formally declare an end to hostilities between Germany and the Allied powers, which were still technically in effect at the time. The message also stated that Berlin, as Germany's capital, would be administered by an international commission comprised of members from the occupying nations. The note, which was perceived as a substantial diplomatic endeavor, instilled optimism regarding the potential for a peaceful resolution to Germany's divided status in the early stages of the Cold War. The Soviet proposal, however, was met with severe skepticism by the Western allies, especially the US. They held a belief that it could potentially represent an endeavor by the Soviet Union to achieve a strategic advantage by neutralizing Germany. Alright, that's all we have for today on this episode. Thanks for staying with me here. I'm Sundeep August. I'll be continuing with this, I think, 3 more parts. Yeah, I'm still working on it. I'll see you then.
This is the Sundeep August Show.